How do we move from a place of authentic inner drive and ambition, of motivation and excitement and passion, rather than running away from the shame of failure and overwhelm of not living up to our full potential or letting everyone down or all these other pressures that assail us every day? Welcome to Human Being, where we gather to practice being more skillfully, creatively human together. Not toward some impossible ideal of perfection, but toward greater authentic connection. My name is Daniel Jacob Self, and I am so honored to have you here with me today. Okay, here we are. So today we're going to be exploring this really crucial distinction surrounding how we engage with any action that we do. So many times the thing can look the same but come from such different places. So, on the one hand, we have the sometimes crushing weight of the expectations on us that come from the messaging of the overculture and all of the prescribed ways of being and succeeding, and then how all of that filters down through all of the other people in our lives, our families, our partners, our jobs, and comes out at us, the ways we perpetuate as we have internalized it into ourselves. The fear of letting everyone down, of not living up to our full potential, the fear of the weight of that shame. And then on the other hand, we have that deep and, for me, sometimes very quiet inner flame, that inner voice that lifts our eyes to the horizon, and when we look at the peak of that mountain, we just feel this little thing in us that says, wouldn't it be special if we could? What would it feel like from the top of it? It's been really stark for me in my growth to really take stock of how much of the action of my day-to-day life is motivated by running away from shame rather than actually moving toward what it is that I authentically desire to be and manifest and do in this life. So that's the problem. That's what we're looking at here. I want to talk to you a little bit about why this is so important to me. Because part of what I hope to do in meeting you in this space is to deconstruct the idea of me being some expert, anonymous voice doling out advice. And rather, I want to talk to you about who I am and why I care about this, in the hopes that that can help you connect it to your own story to see what resonates and what differs, in the hopes that all of it can be of use and of service to you in your journey. So before I found my calling, before I found this work here in somatic and restorative facilitation, I was a musical theater dancer. That was my profession. And in the world of musical theater, at least as I was situated within it, there was one measure of success: being on Broadway. And what I know for myself is that, spending the decades of my life that I did pursuing that singular and very externally dictated goal without actually being in touch with and referencing my own inner place of motivation and inner place of desire and inner discernment about what actually felt true for me, it led to this schisming inside of me. It led to me existing in this duality of performing and crashing. So being pulled to try and shape myself in a certain sort of way, the form I had to be in order to try and achieve this goal, and then collapsing from holding myself up. And I'm speaking in a body metaphor, but there's a literal shaping of ourselves that can sometimes happen when we are working from an externally dictated way of being. So that was my life: perform and crash, perform and crash. And the crashing took the form of isolating. It took the form of bad food, of alcohol, of all the things that we tend to turn to medicate when we are out of integrity with ourselves. Because to be clear, I love the theater and I love dancing, and that will always be a part of my life. But rather than being able to discern what of this do I love, what of this do I feel drawn to, What does success look like and mean for me? And then moving from that place step by step, and maybe determining, you know what? Success for me means working at this sort of a theater, even though that's not Broadway. Or success for me really does mean working as hard as I can to get to Broadway because that's what feels authentic and true inside of me. Rather than even engaging in that discernment process, there was no room for that. It was just the externally prescribed and dictated way, and then just doing everything I could to muscle my way there. And it was very destructive to me. And I know I'm not alone in that. So that's why this matters to me, and that's where I'm coming from. One of the things that I'm noticing, even as I begin to engage in this ambition of my own to create this space where we get to talk about these things, is how quickly something that is coming from an authentic inner place of ambition can just tip over and become prescriptive, become the obligation that I have put on myself. So it started out as this innate drive, and it so quickly becomes now the bar I must meet that I have just erected in front of me. And I think that's an important thing to notice. And then coming back to the present moment and seeing if I can take a breath and notice, where is that inner ambition again? Where is that original impetus? And as with most things, connecting it to the breath seems to really help. Part of this, for me, has to do with how in touch am I in this moment with the exact unique conglomeration of unlikely circumstances that have led to this precise moment in time where I am exactly who I am at exactly the moment in time, at exactly the place and exactly the circumstances. When I can be in touch with that, it can be a real aid to me in feeling that flame that just tickles me and moves me forward, because it's so absurd. It's so unlikely that I would actually be here right now, talking to you, whoever you might be at whatever time. And that helps remind me that the reason I'm recording this right now is because I have this thing in me, that inner drive, that inner spark that is leading me to go to the trouble of trying to articulate this idea, because it has meant so much to me, and I think it might mean so much to you, or just be a little drop even in the sea of your own work and your own healing. So I want to talk about this concept that I came across that I have found to be very orienting and powerful in talking about this sort of thing. And it's called an internal versus an external locus of control. Locus meaning center of concentration. And it was coined by this American psychologist named Julian Rotter, who started talking about from where is the fulcrum of our motivation. Is it inside of us, or is it externally dictated? The fulcrum point, I sometimes think of it like a seesaw. And we have like us and our agency on one end, and then on the other end we have external factors and societal forces and messages of shame and not wanting to let people down. And so an internal locus of control means that largely we are feeling as though we are motivating ourselves forward and finding our agency and our drive from within, versus an external locus of control when all of those forces are overpowering and we are feeling pulled toward it. So that's how I imagine that phrase as being useful, is thinking about where is the main thrust of the motivation for this action coming from. One of the things that Kathy Kane and Stephen Terrell talk about in this really cool book called Nurturing Resilience, which is where I came across this concept. They talk about those with a strong internal locus of control tend to believe they're able to influence the outcome of their experiences, take responsibility for their actions, and take less interest in the opinions of others. They also tend to be high achievers and attribute negative outcomes to their own failings. And that's an important piece that we're going to come back to. Those with a strong external locus of control, on the other hand, tend to believe that life is controlled by others or by external elements that they cannot influence, such as fate or luck, and they tend to blame others for what happens in their lives. They may also have a stronger sense of faith in letting outcomes rest in the hands of others. Again, we're going to come back to that. Okay. Here we are. So one of the interesting things for me in thinking about this idea is thinking about it developmentally. When we're babies, everything is externally located. The locus of control is external. It's all about the forces acting upon us, and hopefully mostly benevolently, mostly for our own good, one would hope. And of course, we know that that's not always the case. But we are largely at the mercy of the care of those around us. And so, being able to figure out what actions we need to do and what ways we need to be in order to be most likely to elicit care from others, that's a pretty important survival mechanism. If I find that when I cry, I get fed, or if I find when I make a certain face, I get hugged, or I get love or care, it's really important that I'm able to take that in and then act upon that. Which is where, if we extrapolate that forward, we can get really stuck in this external locus of control. When people talk about, why am I such a people pleaser, or why do I care so much about what other people think? Well, if we think about it from this developmental point of view and then we sort of zoom out from there, we're very social creatures. Our survival is largely based on our social belonging. We're like herd animals, we move in packs and we need each other to survive. And so being able to learn what the cues are and what the ways of being are that make it most likely that we'll be accepted and loved and cared for by our society and family, that's a really good survival mechanism. So when we're looking to shift that locus of control to a more internalized place, where we're moving more from that authentic drive, I think it's really important to start by acknowledging why it tends to be so externally focused, which is that if we act in ways that are deemed to be unacceptable by the society around us, that is literally a threat to our survival. What does that then mean when it comes to living in a society with all of the foundational ills upon which our culture is based? The violence and the colonialism and the patriarchy, rampant over consumerism, and all of these ways in which we are products socially of a very sick overculture. So then when we are trying to determine how to internalize our own sense of motivation in the face of being wired in our nervous systems to reference the cultural norms, but starting to become more and more aware of the sickness inherent in those cultural norms, well, that puts us in a pretty intense catch-22 on a physiological level. So what can we do? Well, as with most things, the first step has a lot to do with awareness. And how can we begin to increase our awareness of the waters we are swimming in, of what is floating around that we have internalized out of this very, very necessary and important survival mechanism. So I've put together an exercise that has been very helpful for me and for some of my clients in starting to increase our awareness of all those unacknowledged messages that are swimming around in our head and influencing to such a large degree how externally referenced we are, and actually to start to get some semblance of agency over what messages we would like to actually be trying to perpetuate and which messages we're ready to let go of. So go to my website, danieljacobself.com, and look for the piece on locus of control. Or you click the link in the description, you'll be able to sign up there to get that. And that can be a really powerful beginning. At some point in the majority of the work that I do in somatic and restorative facilitation with individuals and relationships and families and groups, whether that's in prisons or in the community, we end up coming back to this issue of false binaries, that there are so many overly simplified ways that we tend to engage with and understand the world. It's something I'm also going to do another piece about, because there are very, again, understandable nervous system correlations with why we tend to oversimplify, but in service to trying to honor a more nuanced and complex view of things, I want to return to that quote from Kathy Kane and Stephen Terrell from Nurturing Resilience, because I think there's something that's important to not overlook. They say those with a strong internal locus of control tend to believe they're able to influence the outcome of their experiences, take responsibility for their actions, and take less interest in the opinions of others. So we're like, great, we want that internal locus of control. We want to move from that inner flame. But get this, they also tend to be high achievers and attribute negative outcomes to their own failures, as opposed to that strong external locus of control, where they tend to believe that life is controlled by others or by external elements they cannot influence. They tend to blame others for what happens in their lives. They may also have a stronger sense of faith in letting outcomes rest in the hands of others. Sometimes being able to acknowledge the role of fate or God or luck or chaos, whatever it is, sometimes that can be a really, really helpful mechanism for maintaining some form of equanimity, some form of peacefulness. So when we internalize our locus of control and we move from that inner flame, it can have this sort of pendulum swinging quality where suddenly then if something doesn't go right, rather than acknowledging, you know what, sometimes forces are just larger than me, having an influence on me, and are interrupting my ability to manifest or to reach the top of that mountain because the storm came. There is an important balance to be found there. Kathy Kane and Stephen Terrell say in the book that the danger of focusing too exclusively on the internal locus of control can be, ironically, risking perpetuating a whole other form of internalized social messaging, the bootstraps paradigm, thereby denying the structural impediments and environmental influences which, if not acknowledged, grow in their power to impede our ability to manifest our greatest purpose in this world. So sometimes, if we don't acknowledge that the storm is going to wash out our path and we simply cannot climb to the top of the mountain tonight, if we say, no, we must, for it is coming from within us that we should, it's going to get in the way of us getting to the top of that mountain eventually. So I like that idea, and I think it's an important caveat to keep in mind. Now, after all of that, it is time for your wisdom. A big part of what I hope to be cultivating with these pieces is engagement in dialogue. I want to start the conversation, not finish it. So go to danieljacobshelf.com and look for this particular piece on locus of control, or click the link in the description and sign up and join in. I really want to start engaging around the meaningful power of all of these ideas, or they're just that, they're hollow ideas. And there's enough noise out there. I don't want to contribute to that. I want to contribute to things that really have deep impact. I'm only going to be sharing the things that have had impact on my life. And so I want to hear how they resonate with you, how they don't resonate with you, what it's bringing up, what it's connecting to. So please do join in, and I will see you again next time. So until then, from here, through here, to there, sending so much care. Bye.